A very warm digital welcome to everyone who's joined us today. Uh, the talk today is titled Superstition, Gimmicks and Scientific Temper, India in 2020. And we've got two speakers with us today. We have Dr. Tejal Kanetkar. She's a faculty at NIAS Bengaluru, and she's an expert on energy and climate change. And we also have with us D. Raghunandan. He's associated with the Delhi Science Forum and the All India People's Science Network. And the session today will be moderated by Rahul Vedya. Rahul is an independent researcher and he's also a member of Anveshan. So, Rahul, over to you.
Thanks, Pranav. Good evening to all. For this session today, that's happening at a quite interesting juncture. The year 2020 began with a supposed promise that India will be entering a status of superpower, and we will be a 5 trillion economy, and many such tall claims back on the back of that. Unfortunately, those promises and promises, as hollow as they were, their hollowness was, it was shown how hollow they were as soon as within few months, with the upcoming pandemic of Corona and the resulting decline in the GDP of 23% as we have seen, and the justification for that has been, as expected, the act of God. As has been pretty much obvious that the present dispensation is anti-reason in every sense of the word, in their policy, theory, and their practice. And so their resolution and their problem solutions are also on expected lines. The first Janta curfew and right afterwards, the call for Thali and Diya and rest of it, all the gimmicks were as obvious in plain sight as they were. Yet the enthusiasm for those gimmicks and the support and the widespread reception that they received also spoke volumes about why the present dispensation enjoys the kind of support it does. That leads us to the question that why this kind of support for superstition, and why this kind of support for myth as history, as the present dispensation of Hindutva and conservative and reactionary forces across the world are kind of enjoying. On that note, specifically speaking about India, as we have seen, the cow has entered the mythical category of almost demigod, and all sorts of properties and all sorts of miraculous things that have been put forth in the name of cow. However, apart from cow, also there has been a great thriving industry of Ayurveda and yoga and the related, all the pop Hindu cultural mythical new icons of businesses, as we know, the yogis, so-called yogis, and the babas of all sorts. So this is basically the drug peddlers of opium of religious variant. And theirs has been the favorite pastime of witch hunting and lynching of over last 5 years. And this is the kind of dire situation that we face. And this is, we are trying to make sense of this, and we are trying to make sense of how to fight and combat this situation. In this regard, today's session, I would say that is an important endeavor, and hence, we need to understand the importance of scientific temper and the very notion of reason and rationality in its fight with Hindutva and conservative forces. We have already lost fighters like Dr. Dabholkar, Professor Kalburgi, Comrade Pansare, and Gauri Lankesh. The fight is long, and the road is pretty dark. But if we have to fight this darkness, then we have to understand the light of reason and rationality. And hence, I would say that we need to discuss these things. So in that regard, I would call upon Professor Kanetkar to start. The session will be essentially placed like this. Each speaker will be speaking for 20-25 minutes. After 20 minutes, I will just highlight that there are just 5 minutes remaining. And after both speakers have spoken, after that we'll have a Q&A session in which for which people can put in their questions in the chat box, and they can mention the question is directed to which speaker in specific. Over to you.
Thank you. So I'm really grateful to Anvesh. While I've interacted with many friends from Anveshar individually, this is the first time I'm speaking on the platform, and I'm glad that it's on a topic that that so many of us have so much to say about. I mean, there's so much of it happening all around us: gimmicks and pseudoscience, superstition, especially during COVID. And I'm really happy that I'm here with Raghu, who has been a friend, comrade, and even collaborator and colleague for many years now. He's asked me to go first for some reason. I'm not quite sure why. But as I've told the organizers, what it does is it gives me an opportunity to be as provocative as I want. So I'm going to grab that opportunity. And, sort of with that sort of anticipatory bail, I shall start off my talk. But I must say that I've given multiple talks on scientific temper in just the last few weeks. It just so happens that Dr. Dabholkar, M.M. Kalburgi and Gauri Lankesh were all murdered around the same time, different years, but around the same time, this month. We also observed the day that Dr. Dabholkar was assassinated as the National Scientific Temper Day. So generally every year there are programs on scientific temper around this time. But this year somehow it's been unique because, like we heard in the introduction, there's been a spectacular surge in pseudoscience, at least, very clearly visible surge in pseudoscience, not just in India. In India, we have been dealing with this surge for the last 6 years now, and many more years, even longer in fact. But even in India, it's been particularly pronounced in these COVID times. But even worldwide, right? We have the anti-maskers, the anti-vaxxers, and the pandemic crowd all over the world. So there are, we have our own peddlers of pseudoscience. We have the homeopathy, of course, from the state itself. We have, while Trump talks about hydroxychloroquine there without scientific evidence, we talk about arsenicum album 30. Without evidence. So we have our own brands of anti-science, everywhere. So what I want to focus on today is these various strands of pseudoscience and their political emergence, and in what way I believe they contribute to the weakening of scientific temper in society. Because with the weakening of reason and rationality, you do have the growth of the inverse. You have the perpetuation of regressive.
Sorry to interrupt. Tejas, if you can speak a bit louder.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, so I was saying that you have, with the weakening of reason and rationality, you have the growth of, conservative, discriminatory ideas in society. The first thread that I want to establish in these various anti-science movements is slightly easier, right? That there's one where the anti-science sentiment emerges from faith. So this aspect of anti-science, it's relatively, like I said, easier to deconstruct and criticize because there is enough empirical evidence to prove that science works in explaining the natural world as well as in terms of delivering humanity from disease and tragedy. So flat earthers, at least the older variety of them, are not very common and they're very easy to criticize. But I think basing this argument just on empirical evidence that science works, it has its drawbacks. Because then you're countered with arguments such as, but science does not have all the answers. Or hasn't science created more problems? All of these thrown in to refute the claim that science works. So I think it's important, that is why, to emphasize the reason for why science works rather than simply citing examples of it having worked. So, so I would sort of put forward an understanding. I think a process of, science is a process of truth seeking that tries to find evidence, construct causal explanations, explore more evidence, and even find fault with one's own explanations of that particular evidence that has been used based on new things. So science doesn't claim at any point of time to have complete answers. We might have some answers. We may not even have answers that are to our liking, or we might stumble upon something that is completely unexpected, but now has to be included in the ambit of the explanation. This may challenge our previous hypothesis, and all of this is an ongoing process. The revision, correction, etc. is all a part of the ongoing process of science. So the idea is that one doesn't seek answers by sitting under a tree waiting for revelation. The science itself should not be seen as this newer authority which trumps all previous sources of authority, because it gives a set of outcomes that are better. Right? One of the drawbacks of just sort of talking about science as better than faith because it works is to say that, then you view science as this another authority that is actually much better and provides much better outcomes than this previous authority, which was religious in nature. But I think it's important to emphasize that science trumps faith because its process of truth seeking is much more kosher. Right? It's not about waiting for revelation. It is about finding evidence, and speculation about otherworldly entities to fill in gaps in knowledge have no place in science. But there are gaps. It's not as if we have all the answers, and we have to learn to deal with those gaps. So that is, I think, what is difference, right? That faith provides certainty, whereas science has to find ways to deal with uncertainty. And it's not easy to do so. We all like to know. Right? So we are always trying to reduce the uncertainty. We are trying to reduce the gaps in our knowledge by either finding more evidence or introducing different methods of studying a particular phenomenon. Again, the process is ongoing. And this uncertainty or the gap in knowledge, when it comes to a new phenomenon or a new virus, is very high. So what we don't know is more than what we know. Right? And this is not new. So for example, something that I study, which is climate change, we have this experience now for 30 years. But this has happened with other viruses, etc. before as well. This has happened with AIDS, it's happened with swine flu, other forms of flu. There have been debates, for example, on Tamiflu, whether it should be used for everybody, it should be used only for some people. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention recommended that all patients with flu should take Tamiflu, whereas then some doctors said, oh no, you should only give it with those who have other complications or comorbidities. So there were disagreements even over the common flu and treatments for the common flu. And we've had these discussions before. So why with COVID-19 are we suddenly behaving as if this lack of knowledge about a new virus or about the uncertainty of an effective response to it is suddenly this new thing, right? So you have health experts who are being derided for their lack of knowledge. If they were, for example, not using what we've learned so far from other viruses, etc., in designing the responses to the current virus, then we should criticize them. Right? There are aspects on which probably they should be criticized, but I'm not sure there is evidence for that. So, but there will be lack of knowledge because the situation is new. There will be mistakes. There will be error corrections. It is all part of the process. Then what complicates it further is that the contagion is spread across the world with widely varying demographies, living conditions, atmospheric conditions, differential administrative responses. It means it becomes even more difficult to actually you don't have a universal sort of answer that fits everything. You have to look at the circumstances. You have to study the circumstances. You have to respond in ways that will be most effective based on your particular situation. And so therefore, because there is this sort of huge amount of uncertainty and lack of a gap in our knowledge, you have this anger with healthcare experts, right? Because now, especially with COVID-19, the impact has affected all of us. The impact has been on all of us. It has affected our daily lives quite significantly, unlike the common flu. The common flu also spreads through contact. But the rapid rate of the spread of this particular contagion, the high risk it poses to certain categories of patients, indicates that we need a society-wide response to it. And a society-wide response means that it impacts all our lives. And if it impacts all our lives, we are all entitled to have an opinion about it, irrespective of whether that opinion is based on science or fact. And this is where I think the because it's sort of moved from the realm of the biological research study to the realm of the personal, because it's impacting all of us, because it's a society, even if we have COVID or not, it's a society-wide response. And this then handling lack of knowledge and uncertainty in the realm of the personal is a problem. It has always been a problem. Okay? And this leads to problems even among scientists who do deal with uncertainty in their research, because when it comes to the personal, the dealing with the uncertainty and lack of knowledge, or a sort of completely open-ended approach to understanding society, understanding social relations, etc., it has been absent even in the scientists. So I've been asked a lot of times, and I'm not just me, I'm sure many atheists who defend science are asked this. I'm sure Raghu has faced this question a lot of times, that you always deride science, you always say that science is a problem, and that doing science means actually dealing with uncertainty, dealing with lack of knowledge. But then scientists also believe in God. They don't reject religion. More than half of your ISRO and DRDO scientists may be Janayadhari Brahmins, implying that they're not just Brahmins by birth, but they're also Brahmins by choice, right? So and there are varied responses to it. So in the US, you have people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, etc., dismiss this as not important. They say that, for many scientists, belief in God, faith, religion, etc., has nothing to do with scientific research. And how they view religion is very different. They will, basically reject all the blatantly unreal and unreasonable elements from the Bible, and then just take what remains as a moral code of public behavior, which is fairly reasonable. All that is important is that they should not bring any of these ideas into the classroom, is how they talk about it. Now, I'm not so sure that the separation is that easy or even possible. It does have an impact, even in the US, for example, when it comes to questions of gender and women in science, for example, and the irrationality that persists about this, even among scientists. So if you sort of simply say that, it's fine, religion can have a role in your personal life, without necessarily challenging even that role in personal life. So, I think it does create problems. It does create barriers to social transformation. So we have that even in India. So one may be doing excellent research in the lab, building India's own version of the light water reactor or whatever, but the same people may tell their daughter not to marry a Dalit boy, not to marry a Muslim boy, or discriminate against students from different backgrounds, even in the classroom. So the fact that your quest for rigorous evidence-based research, the acceptance of uncertainty and evidence as the basis on which you actually understand the natural world, you do this in the laboratory, it does not translate to the application of a scientific method, to the study of society, to the study of social relations, that I think is the gap between science and scientific temper. Using science and reason, rationality as tools to understand society and to change it. I think that is where the gap lies. And this is not it's not necessarily something that has always been the case. In the global north, for example, at one time, science was seen as the basis on which you challenged the authority of religion, not only for its claims about explaining the natural world and its origins, but also about its claims about the social world and its justification of the hierarchical organization of society. So science as something that is truly secular comes from this idea about the anti-authoritarian skepticism that is the hallmark of science. And that, I think, in my view, what scientific temper is. When you sort of remove science as this sort of source of authority that is that hands you down some set of outcomes, but you think of it as a process of understanding the world around you, that is when scientific temper as a concept becomes real. My favorite definition of it is, how the statement of purpose for the Society for Scientific Temper defines this. That knowledge is the understanding that knowledge is a product of human endeavor and it is not acquired through revelation. And so therefore, scientific temper provides the tools to question what I would call social irrationality. So this, taking it to the other, the next thread. So one thread is, of course, that how is it that you basically differentiate scientific temper and the dogma of faith? And how do you, in what way does it sort of fundamentally differ? Is it possible to say that, I will do science in the lab, but I will be as irrational as I can be, believe in the caste system, etc., when I am outside my lab? Is that contradiction possible? And I think it creates major problems, even in terms of the development of science and technological capability. It frustrates the development of scientific and technological capability. And therefore, I think this contradiction that exists and seems to sort of coexist happily together needs to be confronted and broken. I think there is another thread that I want to go into here, is that the fact that science has potential for human emancipation is also questioned at times, because control and appropriation of profit, or to maintain exclusivity and social hierarchy, does curtail the development of scientific temper in society. And so therefore, you do not consider the fact that science has the potential for human emancipation as an important aspect of science. And even when people give sort of lip service to it, they do fall prey to some of these problems. So again, I mentioned Neil deGrasse Tyson earlier, or Richard Dawkins, etc. They all fall prey to this, because for them, science qua science conquers all. Right? But the fact that it is a process of it is the process of social transformation that science enables, which makes the power of science real. Right? That it enables us to question inequitable social relations that form the biggest examples of irrationality and unreason that we live with daily. So we should not see science as a set of outcomes and pronouncements, but as a means to understand the natural and social world, and also a means to change it. To the restriction of science to simply a set of outcomes and pronouncements as any other authority, it serves certain interests. And in my opinion, it is also helped on by other groups, mostly, I would say, unwittingly. And this is where, being provocative comes in. So I think, globally in the 1960s, 70s, etc., with the emergence of the anti-war movement, we had the peace-loving, non-conformist, countercultural movements of that time. They typically caricatures as anti-modern, anti-science, and especially anti-technology. Like everything, and of course, there is nuance here also. It may not be right to paint them all with the same brush. But perhaps here we find for the first time a large-scale expression of the suspicion of science and technology in contemporary times. We've had this before, but in contemporary times, this is it represents this clearly. So many of our present present-day anti-vaccination campaigners derive from this legacy, right? From the legacy of suspicion of science and technology. It's really their suspicion of big private capital, the military state, or Bill Gates is going to kill us all. That's the where it comes from. But it translates to the rejection of science and technology itself. And in India, we have another version of the same thing. We have academic support to people's movements that are increasingly moving away from the rights-based discourse to this sort of alternative lifestyle discourse. So the glorification of a of poverty. So when historically, when we've had opposition to land acquisition of tribal lands, the focus has been on their right to land, livelihood, employment, and the hypocrisy of the development narrative has been shown up by contrasting it to the misery of the lives of the people who are affected by projects and things like that. But now there is this new trend to somehow project that misery, malnutrition, and abject poverty as a lifestyle that is closer to nature. Right? So indigenous knowledge is exalted and glorified and elevated to a pedestal, and there is no fault that is found in the condition of people living in lives of drudgery and disease without the benefits of modern technology. In fact, sometimes the blame for drudgery and disease is laid at the door of science, not at the door of inequitable access to the benefits of scientific development, but as an outcome of scientific development itself. So there is this skepticism of science that is opportunistic, that emerges from the far right. Right? Globally, we see this happening in the far right. In India, of course, represented by the Sangh Parivar, the BJP, etc., and their leaders. you have another skepticism of science that is confused, that emerges from the far left. And this sort of skepticism of science and technology and confusion, either of the opportunistic variety or the confused variety, it always benefits the far right. It does not benefit the left. Now, the far right is trying to increasingly capitalize on the anti-vaccination campaigns in Europe, for example. And similarly, you have the peddlers of obscurantism here, from Ayurveda to homeopathy. They feel free to do and say as they please. They basically capitalize on the disillusionment of the people with the modern healthcare system because they've had such limited access to it. So I think this sort of collapsing of a lack of access to modern science as an attribute of science is something that happens on the far left and the far right, and they end up eventually strengthening the far right. The left does not derive benefit from this. So anyway, so on that note, without saying too much, I think I've sort of sketched out a few points. Maybe we can do this more in the question answer session. I would conclude by saying that the fight against pseudoscience and fight for scientific temper will have to come from strengthening, our own fights for people's rights. It will be a betrayal of the people if we do not address this as part of our movements, simply because pseudoscience is part of people's beliefs or cultures. There is a tendency to do this, more brazenly in some groups. What is considered the main opposition to the BJP, the Congress. Shashi Tharoor is actually my favorite punching bag because he always makes it so easy. He combines this sort of suave liberal persona with frequent and very public temple visits, and participates in rituals and things like that. And he doesn't even stop at that. He goes a step further and writes a book trying to excavate sort of some, liberal traditions in Hinduism without even an attempt to acknowledge the inequities of caste and gender in it. But this also happens in the less opportunistic left liberal circles as well. And I think we have to acknowledge that. It comes from confusing what a people's program is. Okay. And also it comes from sort of letting the cultural conservatives set the agenda and the terms of the public debate. The idea should be to create consciousness, create class consciousness, not validate false consciousness. And the task should be to push the envelope of public consciousness. The idea of scientific temper as taking on social irrationality and taking back the science and technology that belongs to the people in the first place. I think that is what should be strengthened. The idea of science as a universal good, as belonging to everybody, not a refrain of certain private corporations, etc., should not be confused and collapsed into a fight against science and technology. I think that is very important because that kind of sort of confusion helps the far right, which works on a certain set of its own opportunistic aims. Its sort of peddling of pseudoscience feeds into its need to maintain social hierarchy because it derives its support from that hierarchy. From the establishment and the perpetuation of that system, it derives its support, electoral support, political support from there. So that gets even more strengthened if we sort of don't challenge this and don't challenge the envelope of public consciousness. So I'll end there. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. That was quite illuminating and thought-provoking talk. I would call upon D. Raghunandan to have his speech.
We'll do question and answer afterwards, is it?
Yes. You can speak first and then we will do a joint Q&A.
Okay. साथियों, आपने अभी तेजल से काफी विस्तार में इस विषय के बारे में सुना कि वैज्ञानिक दृष्टिकोण का क्या मतलब है और खास करके उन्होंने विज्ञान की जगह, वैज्ञानिक दृष्टिकोण में विज्ञान की क्या जगह है उसके बारे में काफी विस्तार से आपको बताया। मैं क्योंकि पिछले अब हुए 41 साल से जन विज्ञान आंदोलन के साथ जुड़ा हूं और जन विज्ञान आंदोलन में हमारे काफी कार्यकर्ता और हमारा काम काज इसी दिशा में है कि समाज के अंदर अंधविश्वास के खिलाफ लड़ना और उस लड़ाई के साथ वैज्ञानिक चेतना को बढ़ाना एक तरफ, पर उससे भी ज्यादा मुझे लगता है कि वैज्ञानिक दृष्टिकोण को बढ़ाना, ये हमारे जन विज्ञान आंदोलन के कामकाज का एक बहुत बड़ा हिस्सा रहा है। तो उस संदर्भ में आज के काल में कोरोना वायरस जहां तक है, वहां पे भी हमने इन्हीं बातों के साथ टक्कर लेना पड़ा, क्योंकि ये कोविड को लेके भी समाज के अंदर कई सारे अंधविश्वास भी हैं, गैर वैज्ञानिक सोच भी है और विज्ञान के खिलाफ भी काफी, जिसे सूडो साइंस कहा जाए या एंटी साइंस कहा जाए, इस प्रकार के काफी जो है समस्याएं खड़ी हैं जिनके साथ हमें टक्कर लेना पड़ रहा है। पर इस संदर्भ में मैं दो चीजें कहूंगा। वो ये कि समाज के अंदर जब कोरोना की मारामारी अब इतना फैला है, तो कुछ तबकों को छोड़ के हमने ये एनकाउंटर नहीं किया, हमने ये सामने नहीं आया हमारे कि देखिए जो भी वैज्ञानिक कहते हैं कोरोना के बारे में, हम उसको सब छोड़ देते हैं, उससे हमें कोई मतलब नहीं है, हम केवल अपने गुरु संत की बात को सुनेंगे कि कोरोना को कैसे लड़ा जाए और हम डॉक्टर की नहीं सुनेंगे। ये मुझे लगता है कि हमने ज्यादा इस प्रकार के एटीट्यूड या इस प्रकार के सोच को हमने ज्यादा सामने नहीं किया आम जनता के बीच में। आम जनता जहां तक हो सके वो डॉक्टर के कहना, सामाजिक कार्यकर्ता जो विज्ञान के प्रचार में हमने भी सामने रखा, उसके बारे में ज्यादातर जहां तक हो सके उसका पालन करते हैं। अब ये अलग बात है कि अगर जनता बहुत भीड़ भाड़ के इलाके में रहती है और फिजिकल डिस्टेंस 2 गज की दूरी ले लीजिए या 1 गज की दूरी ले लीजिए, वो नहीं पालन कर सकते, या एक झुग्गी के अंदर 10 लोग एक परिवार में रह रहे हैं, उसके बारे में है, तो वो 1 गज की दूरी इसलिए नहीं मेंटेन कर पा रहे कि उनको ये फिजिकल डिस्टेंस के बारे में कुछ अंधविश्वास हो या उसको मानते ना हो, कर नहीं सकते, मजबूर है, उनकी मजबूरी ये है कि वो कर नहीं पा रहे। कई बार हमने ये भी देखा कि एक परिवार में हर व्यक्ति को मास्क खरीदने तक की क्षमता नहीं थी, रोजगार नहीं थे, रोजी रोटी नहीं थी लोगों के पास, तो अगर थोड़े बहुत पैसे आते तो उसको वो रोटी में खर्च करते या मास्क खरीदने में लगाते, और अगर मास्क खरीदना पड़े तो उसको छोड़ के बस एक दुपट्टा लपेट लिया और उससे काम चला है। पर मैं उल्टा ये कहूंगा कि समाज के अंदर ऐसे ताकतें हैं जो अंधविश्वास को जबरदस्ती फैलाना चाहते हैं। मैं ये आपके सामने इसलिए रख रहा हूं कि हमने, मेरे ख्याल से हमारे बीच में भी एक, मुझे लगता है, गलत फहमी है, और वो ये है, और इसके बारे में मैं थोड़ी देर बाद वापस लौटूंगा, पर हम में भी ये एक गलत फहमी है कि जनता के बीच में अनपढ़ लोग हैं, पढ़े लिखे लोग नहीं हैं, अंधविश्वास के जकड़ में फंसे लोग हैं, और इसीलिए गलत फहमियां बढ़ती हैं समाज के अंदर। इस बात को मैं नहीं मानता। मैं ये मानता हूं कि समाज के अंदर अगर आप रैशनैलिटी की बात कहें, तर्क आधारित सोच की बात कहें, तो आम जनता के बीच में और पढ़े लिखे लोगों के बीच में ज्यादा अंतर नहीं है। अंधविश्वास का फैलना, पढ़े लिखे लोग, वैज्ञानिक तबके, उनमें भी उतना ही अंधविश्वास है जितना मजदूर वर्ग में है या झुग्गी झोंपड़ी में रहने वाले में है, वो भी बिल्कुल रैशनल सोच लेके अपना काम करते हैं और हम भी करते हैं, पर अंधविश्वास के जकड़ में हम दोनों फंसे हुए हैं। तो हमें ये गलतफहमी नहीं होनी चाहिए। मेरे ख्याल से कई बार हमें अपने कार्यकर्ताओं में भी ये चेतना को बढ़ाने की जरूरत पड़ती है कि हम सोचते हैं कि हम दूसरे को उजागर करें, दूसरे के जिंदगी में और सोच में रोशनी लाएं, ये मानते हुए कि हमारे में ये चेतना बहुत बढ़ के है कि हम बिल्कुल अंधविश्वास के जकड़ में नहीं है और हम ये रोशनी अब दूसरे को लेके आएंगे। मुझे लगता है कि थोड़ा इसमें हमें खुद अपने बारे में भी सोचना चाहिए कि हमारे सोच में, हमारे रहन सहन में अंधविश्वास कितना है या गैर वैज्ञानिक सोच कितना है। और जो तेजल अभी कह रही थी कि क्या हम भी एक हमारी जिंदगी का एक हिस्सा हम रैशनल तौर पे जीते हैं और एक हिस्सा हम इरैशनल जिंदगी हम काटते हैं, इसके बारे में थोड़ा सेल्फ क्रिटिकली भी हमें अगर देखें तो मुझे लगता है कि हम समाज के अंदर ये जो हमारे ही बीच में एक कॉन्शियसली हो या अनकॉन्शियसली हो ये सोच कि पढ़े लिखे लोग, वैज्ञानिक लोग जो हैं वो दूसरों के बीच में जाके अंधकार को हटाएं, ये हमारी मनसा मुझे लगता है कि नहीं होनी चाहिए। तेजल ने बहुत स्पष्टता से ये बात को रखा कि हम वैज्ञानिक दृष्टिकोण को और वैज्ञानिक सोच को और फैलाने का काम इसलिए कर रहे हैं, केवल ये नहीं कि सच्चाई की खोज निकले कि आज एक सवाल हमारे सामने है उसका जवाब क्या है वो निकले, पर हम ये सोचने का तरीका समाज के अंदर फैलाना चाहते हैं कि वैज्ञानिक दृष्टिकोण से क्रिटिकल थिंकिंग जिसे कहते हैं, गहन सोच, उसका आदत जो है समाज के अंदर बने, इसको हम फैलाने में लगे। मैं 3 बात पे थोड़ा इसके बारे में आपके सामने रखना चाहूंगा। केवल ये नहीं विज्ञान और अविज्ञान के बीच का फर्क या टक्कर हो, पर वैज्ञानिक सोच, वैज्ञानिक दृष्टिकोण और अंधविश्वास के बारे में, इसके बारे में, संबंध के बारे में मैं थोड़ी सी रोशनी डालना चाहूंगा। पहला यह है कि आपको याद होगा अन्वेषण तो समाज शास्त्रियों का संगठन है, तो मैं इसीलिए इस बात पे थोड़ा और जोर दूंगा कि आपको याद होगा कि समाज शास्त्र मार्क्स वेबर ने, जिसे कहना चाहिए एक तरह से कार्ल मार्क्स के विचारों के प्रति एक टक्कर लेने की कोशिश थी, उन्होंने ये बात को सामने रखा कि समाज में बदलाव जो है चेतना से होता है, अपने सोच से होता है। और वो ये भी उन्होंने ये एक आइडिया सामने रखा कि पश्चिमी देश, भारत में, चीन में, एशिया में समाज पिछड़ा इसलिए है कि हमारे धर्म, हमारा धार्मिक सोच हमेशा दूसरे लोक के बारे में, परलोक के बारे में सोचता है, जो कि वेबर ने कहा ये दिस इज इरैशनल। जब इस दुनिया के बारे में सोचें जैसे पश्चिमी देशों में होता है, जैसे इंग्लैंड में हुआ या यूरोप में हुआ या जर्मनी में हुआ, तो रैशनैलिटी बढ़ता है, क्योंकि आप इस समाज में आज के काल में रैशनली सोचेंगे, तर्क आधारित सोचेंगे और फिर समाज में तरक्की बढ़ेगी। उन्होंने ये नहीं कहा कि पिछड़ापन का कारण समाज के अंदर ही है, कि समाज के अंदर कुछ ताकतें हैं, सामाजिक ताकतें, आर्थिक ताकतें समाज के अंदर जो अर्थव्यवस्था को बनाए रखे हैं, उसके वजह से पिछड़ापन बढ़ता है। पर उन्होंने इस बात को उल्टा करके ये रखने की कोशिश की कि समाज के अंदर पिछड़ापन इसीलिए होता है कि लोगों के दिमाग जो है वो बिल्कुल अंधविश्वास से भरा है, इसीलिए लोग जो है आपके रोजमर्रा की जिंदगी की समस्याओं को समझ नहीं पाते, तो इसलिए पिछड़ापन को हम पीछे नहीं हट पा रहे। हमारे देश में भी अगर आप पिछले 60-70 साल पहले की बात सोचेंगे और हमारे जो स्वतंत्रता संग्राम के अंदर भी का विचार देखेंगे तो उसमें भी ये आपको एक दिशा, एक नजर आएगी कि हमारे देश में अगर हम आगे बढ़ना चाहते हैं, हम एक आधुनिक प्रगतिशील समाज को बढ़ावा देना चाहते हैं, तो हमारे समाज के अंदर अंधविश्वास को खत्म कर देना चाहिए, तभी हमारा समाज आगे बढ़ पाएगा। मेरे ख्याल से हमारे अंदर भी इसके बारे में थोड़ी सी सोचने की जरूरत है, क्योंकि मुझे लगता है कि कुछ हद तक हमारे लोगों ने भी कई बार जो वैज्ञानिक दृष्टिकोण को फैलाना चाहते हैं या रैशनलिस्ट मूवमेंट्स के अंदर जो है, उनमें भी ये कहीं ना कहीं विचार है कि अगर हम अंधविश्वास को समाज से हटा दें तो समाज आगे बढ़ेगा आधुनिकता की तरफ। तो मेरा ये मानना है कि अंधविश्वास एक वैक्यूम में नहीं होता। अंधविश्वास इसीलिए होता है कि कुछ सामाजिक ताकतें हैं जो ये इन अंधविश्वासों को जीवित रखते हैं, और जीवित इसीलिए रखते हैं कि वो नहीं चाहते कि वैज्ञानिक दृष्टिकोण, तर्क आधारित सोच समाज के अंदर फैले। क्योंकि अगर वैज्ञानिक दृष्टिकोण, तर्क आधारित सोच समाज के अंदर अगर फैलेगा, तो जैसे तेजल कह रही थी, तो फिर सामाजिक व्यवस्था के ऊपर एक सवालिया निशान जो है कैसे खड़ा हो, उसके उत्तर ढूंढने के रास्ते कैसे खुलेंगे? वो नहीं खुलेंगे। इसलिए तो इसके लिए फैलाया जाता है। और मुझे लगता है कि ये कोरोना के काल में संघ परिवार और उनके मित्रों की तरफ से जो कोशिश रही है वो इस दिशा में रही। ये नहीं कि वो डॉक्टर जो कह रहा है कि उसको गलत कहे और कहे कि भाई हमारे आयुर्वेद में तो ये कहा था, ये डॉक्टर जो कह रहे हैं वो गलत है। इस तरह का अंधविश्वास वो नहीं फैला रहे थे, वो एक दूसरे किस्म का अंधविश्वास फैला रहे हैं। और वो क्या है, 3-4 उदाहरण मैं आपको सामने देता हूँ। एक, उन्होंने ग्रामीण इलाके में अगर आप जाएंगे तो वहां पे उन्होंने फैलाया कि ये कोरोना क्या है, ये कोरोना बीमारी है कि ये कोरोना मैया है जो इस कोरोना को फैला रही है। जैसे आपको याद होगा कि पहले स्मॉल पॉक्स, चिकन पॉक्स, मीजल्स, उसको भी यही कहा जाता था कि ये एक माई है जो इनको फैला रही है। उस माई को अगर हम खुश करें तो ये इसको दूर भगाया जा सकता है। तो ये संघ परिवार खूब फैलाती है, गांव में जाके उनके कार्यकर्ता घर घर में जाके लोगों को समझाते हैं कि देखिए कोरोना मैया नाराज है, उनको खुश करना है तो आप मंदिर में जाओ, प्रार्थना करो। घर के अंदर की जो महिलाएं हैं उनको सही तरीके से जीना चाहिए अपने जीवन को, संस्कारी जीवन को जीना है। अगर महिलाएं ये रोल प्ले करेंगी तो वो अपने परिवार को सुरक्षित रख पाएंगी। तो अगर आप गौर से देखेंगे, ये विज्ञान और विज्ञान के अंदर से निकले हुए आधुनिक काल के मेडिसिन, साइंस के साथ टक्कर नहीं है। उनका इंटरेस्ट ये है, उसके पीछे धक्का उस बात को दे रहे हैं कि समाज के अंदर एक संस्कारी रूप को अपनाया जाए, और उसके साथ कि ठीक है वो डॉक्टर जो कह रहे हैं वो ठीक है, जब आप बीमार होते हैं तो आप डॉक्टर के पास जाइए, बाकी चीजों के लिए आप हमारी बात मानिए। यानी कि समाज के अंदर साइंस एज एन अथॉरिटी को नहीं मानना चाहिए, ट्रेडिशनल अथॉरिटी को मानते रहिए। ये मेजर मकसद है इसका। और इसी को चलते बाबा रामदेव ने भी कहा चलो मैं अब इस सोच को लेके कैपिटलाइज करता हूँ। योगा गुरु रामदेव के बारे में समाज के अंदर एक बहुत आदर है, तो मैं उसको लेके इस बात को जोड़ूंगा कि आयुर्वेद में हमारे पास कई इलाज हैं और उसको लेके मैंने एक दवाई बनाई है और उसको मैंने सामने रखा कि इससे जो है कोरोना का इलाज हो जाएगा। पहली बार मेरे ख्याल से संघ परिवार और भाजपा सरकार के अंदर भी एक लक्ष्मण रेखा मेरे ख्याल से इसको लेके पार हो गया और हमारे हर्षवर्धन जी मंत्री खुद को सामने आके कहना पड़ा, मजबूर होके कहना पड़ा कि नहीं, जब तक इसका साइंटिफिक वैज्ञानिक तौर से प्रूफ नहीं होगा, साबित नहीं होगा, तब तक हम इसको इलाज नहीं मानेंगे। इसको कह लीजिए इम्यूनिटी बूस्टर, वो तो आप घर के अंदर गर्म पानी से आप गरारे करें या अदरक के पानी का घोल बना के करें, ये सब करते रहो, करोगे नहीं करोगे तब भी कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ने वाला, तो वो आप करते रहें, उसी टाइप का है ये। पर इसमें इनको करना पड़ा और ये लोग हैं, हर्षवर्धन जी खुद लोग हैं जिन्होंने साइंस कांग्रेस में जाके कई जगहों पे जाके अंट शंट बातें कही हैं कि हमारे भूतपूर्व काल में, प्राचीन काल में हवाई जहाज लोग उड़ाया करते थे, स्पेस ट्रैवल होता था, गणेश के सिर ऊपर रख के उससे जो है वो कॉस्मेटिक सर्जरी एडवांस्ड हुआ करता था। ये सब फैलाने वाले लोग हैं, पर जब वो इस प्रैक्टिकल बात पे आई कोरोना को लेके, उस पे उनको भी आके सामने कहना पड़ेगा कि नहीं। पर मुझे लगता है कि इसके पीछे विज्ञान और अंधविश्वास का टक्कर नहीं था, इसमें टक्कर था कि समाज के अंदर अथॉरिटी कौन है, समाज के अंदर विचार के मामले में नेता कौन है। हम हैं जो योग गुरु बैठे हैं, हमारी बात को लोग माने, संघ परिवार के लोग हैं जो चुप चुप जाके घरों के अंदर जाके वो अपनी बात को फैलाते हैं, या वैज्ञानिक हैं, डॉक्टर हैं जो सोच समझ के कोरोना को लेके बात करें। दूसरी बात इसके साथ जुड़ा हुआ जो मैं जोड़ना चाहता हूं, जो कोशिश थी शुरुआत में भी, प्रधानमंत्री ने खुद कहा जब लॉकडाउन उन्होंने लगाया कि मुझे 21 दिन का समय दीजिए। 21 दिन क्यों? 21 दिन क्योंकि 21 दिन के अंदर महाभारत का युद्ध लड़ा गया और सच की जीत हुई 21 दिन के अंदर। तो मोदी जी ने यही बात रखा सामने कि 21 दिन का मुझे समय दीजिए लॉकडाउन खत्म होने को और हमारी ही जीत होगी। 21 दिन तो गए, अब 21 हफ्ते होने जा रहे हैं आसपास, जीत तो कहीं रह गया। अब उसके बारे में बात भी करना बंद कर दिया प्रधानमंत्री ने। अब कोई कोरोना की बात नहीं होती, जब मन की बात होती है तो वो खिलौने की बात करते हैं या अपने तस्वीर मोर वगैरह के साथ अपने पार्क के अंदर, उन्हीं का बात होता है। वो कहीं और परलोक में है, वो हमारे बीच में नहीं है जो इन समस्याओं के साथ लगे हैं। पर उनके भक्त, अब देखिए उन्होंने जो कॉल दिया उस टाइम पे कि उन्होंने देखे ये तस्वीर टेलीविजन वगैरह पे कि इटली में, इंग्लैंड में, जर्मनी में लोग हफ्ते में एक दिन आके बाहर अपने घरों में आके तालियां पीटते थे अपने डॉक्टर और नर्स वगैरह के समर्थन में कि आप बहुत योद्धा हैं, बहुत काम कर रहे हैं, हम आपकी बहुत तारीफ कर रहे हैं। इसी बात को लेके फिर मोदी जी ने कहा भाई हम भी करके दिखाते हैं हमारे देश में। और फिर वो कहते हैं कि भाई हमारे देश में देखो इतने करोड़ लोग जो है आए, लोगों ने गिनना भी शुरू कर दिया, इनकी जो ट्रोल आर्मी है उन्होंने भी गिनना शुरू कर दिया। पर उन्होंने ये भी कहा कि देखिए इतने दिए जले हमारे घरों में कि उसकी रोशनी नासा के सैटेलाइट ने भी जो है उसको नापा, जो तालियां बजी हमारे यहाँ उसको भी सैटेलाइट नापा, और इसकी जो वाइब्रेशन है उसके वजह से कोरोना वायरस के ऊपर कितना असर पड़ेगा ये नासा के वैज्ञानिकों ने भी जो है इसको पहचाना। अब देखिए जो लोग अंधविश्वास को फैलाना चाह रहे हैं, अंधविश्वास को इसीलिए फैलाना चाह रहे हैं कि समाज को संस्कारी दिशा में ले जाएं, ना कि तर्क आधारित वैज्ञानिक सोच, गहन सोच की तरफ ले जाया जाए, लोगों को अंधकार में रखा जाए, तो यही लोग अपनी बात को बढ़ाने के लिए नासा का समर्थन लेना पसंद करते हैं। क्यों? क्योंकि अंधविश्वास को बेचने के लिए भी वो विज्ञान का सहारा लेना चाह रहे हैं। ये दिखाता है कि वो भी जानते हैं कि समाज में विज्ञान का के प्रति एक मान्यता है। जनता विज्ञान के शक्ति, विज्ञान की क्षमता, विज्ञान से लेके अपने जीवन में भला लाना, इसको जनता पहचानता है। और इसीलिए क्योंकि जनता इस बात को पहचानता है, तो लोग जो अंधविश्वास फैलाना चाहते हैं वो भी इस अंधविश्वास को फैलाने के लिए विज्ञान का सहारा लेना उनको सही लगता है। बाबा रामदेव ने भी अपनी दवाई को लेके जब अपनी बात सामने रखी, उन्होंने भी इसका सहारा लिया कि मैंने क्लिनिकल ट्रायल किए हैं इसके। हालांकि ये बाद में निकला कि ट्रायल जो है वो खास कोई ट्रायल नहीं था। 50 से एक लोग मेन ग्रुप में थे, 50 से एक ग्रुप कंट्रोल में थे, और 19-20 का ही फर्क था जो दवाई ली या नहीं ली। तो वो खास क्लिनिकल, पर वो ये दिखाना चाह रहे थे कि देखो वैज्ञानिक तौर पे मैंने इसको साबित किया है। तो मुझे लगता है कि हमें ये 3 चीजों के बारे में अपना आइडिया कि हमारी लड़ाई में अंधविश्वास के खिलाफ जो हम हमारे अभियान को हम आगे बढ़ाते हैं, उसका कितना रोल है और हम इसको कहाँ तक देखते हैं। तो मैं इसको 3 भाग में संक्षेप में आपके सामने रखता हूं। पहला, कि हम अगर अपने आप को वैज्ञानिक दृष्टिकोण, वैज्ञानिक सोच के योद्धा हम अपने आप को मानते हैं, तो कोई भी योद्धा अपने सामने जब वो जंग के मैदान में उतरा है, वो अपने टारगेट ढूंढ के वहां पे वार करता है। सिर्फ आगे जाके हाथ पैर को हिलाने से योद्धा अपने लक्ष्य तक नहीं पहुंचता। अ वॉरियर चूजेस हिज बैटल्स। तो मुझे लगता है कि जो तेजल ने कहा वो बिल्कुल सही, कि जो लोग सोचते हैं कि मैं अपने घर में जो करता हूं वो एक अलग है, और मैं अपने दफ्तर में आके या लैब में जाके जो विज्ञान करता हूं वो अलग है, और इनको अलग रखना चाहते हैं, वो गलत है। मानता हूं मैं उस बात को, पर मैं ये कह रहा हूं कि जब हम जंग के मैदान में उतरते हैं, मेरा टारगेट नंबर 1 उसको कन्विंस करना, उस वैज्ञानिक को, कि भाई ये तू गैर वैज्ञानिक काम क्यों कर रहा है, ये मेरा नंबर 1 टारगेट नहीं है। मेरे सामने लड़ाई लड़ने के लिए बहुत सारे टारगेट हैं, और अगर वो अपने जिंदगी को एक तरफ जीना चाहता है, बशर्ते वो रोजमर्रा की जिंदगी में, हम सब की जिंदगी में उल्टा असर नहीं पड़ता, तो मैं उसको परे रखता हूं, उसके साथ में बाद में टक्कर लूंगा। पहला मेरा टक्कर है, जैसे मैं अभी उदाहरण दे रहा था आपको कोरोना को लेके, अगर कोई गलत फहमी इस पे फैलाता है कि मास्क मत पहनो, आप केवल हनुमान चालीसा को रचो और आप सेफ रहेंगे, तो मैं उसको खिलाफ नंबर 1 जाके लड़ूंगा। तो मेरा पहला इसमें सुझाव है कि हम अपने दुश्मन को चुनें, और दुश्मन को चुन के हम अपनी प्रायोरिटीज को आगे रखें। हमारा मेन दुश्मन कौन है और उसके साथ कैसे टक्कर लड़ा जाए। दूसरी बात, और तेजल ने ये बात बिल्कुल बहुत अच्छी तरह से रखा, कि मैं उन अंधविश्वास के साथ टक्कर सबसे ज्यादा लूंगा जो समाज के अंदर अंधेरे को फैलाना चाहते हैं। रोशनी को लाने के बजाय वो समाज के अंदर अंधेरा फैलाना चाहते हैं। मैं वहां पे जाके अपना बात रखूंगा। आज के दिन समाज के अंदर संघ परिवार इसी बात को लेके फैला रहा है अपनी बात को। परसेप्शन इज मोर इंपॉर्टेंट देन रियलिटी। जो आपको दिखता है वो छोड़ो, आंकड़े छोड़ो, एक सोच जो आपके मन में हो उसके बारे में आप सोचो, उसको आगे रखो। मेरा मानना यह है कि आज के दिन अंधविश्वास जिसे कहते हैं, उसका अंग्रेजी में ट्रांसलेशन है ब्लाइंड फेथ, है अंधविश्वास। सबसे बड़ा अंधविश्वास हमारे देश में यह है कि प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जो कहेंगे वो सही है और वो अपने देश में रास्ता दिखाएंगे। ये सबसे बड़ा अंधविश्वास है हमारे देश में। अब देखिए, सोचिए, नोटबंदी हो गया, जीएसटी की बर्बादी हो गई, लॉकडाउन हो गया, देश का जीडीपी नीचे गिर गया। लगता है कि अगर कोई दिमाग लगाए तो लगेगा भैया सरकार ने सब कुछ गलत किया, पर समाज के अंदर अभी ये चेतना नहीं है। अभी भी वो, जिसे मैं केवल यही कह सकता हूं, अंधविश्वास, क्योंकि समाज के अंदर आंखें बंद हैं, दिल खुला है, और उनका दिल अभी भी कह रहा है कि नरेंद्र मोदी जो है हमारे देश के नेता है, वो इस काल से हमें बचाएगा। इस अंधविश्वास को मैं मानता हूं हमारा बहुत बड़ा एक दुश्मन है, और इस अंधविश्वास को मिटाने में केवल, और ये बात भी तेजल बड़ी स्पष्टता से कहा, कि केवल आंकड़ों को लेके सामने जाके रखने की बात नहीं है, उन आंकड़ों पे आधारित परसेप्शन को कैसे बदला जाए ये भी हमें सामने रखना पड़ेगा। तभी हम समाज के अंदर जो एक सोच बना हुआ है उसको हम बदल सकते हैं। तो ये मैं दूसरी बात आपके सामने रखूंगा। तीसरी बात जो मैं सामने रखूंगा वो ये कि तर्क आधारित सोच, हम नरेंद्र दाभोलकर के हत्या के दिन 20 अगस्त को हम नेशनल साइंटिफिक टेम्पर डे करके मानते हैं। लोग नरेंद्र दाभोलकर के बारे में जब नाम लेते हैं उसका, दे से द रैशनलिस्ट नरेंद्र दाभोलकर। मैं अभी भी नरेंद्र दाभोलकर को रैशनलिस्ट नहीं मानता। मैं उनको एक वैज्ञानिक दृष्टिकोण के एक योद्धा के तौर पे मैं उनको देखता हूं, क्योंकि उनका मेन सोच अगर कोई एक निकल के आता है वो ये था, उन्होंने कहा हम उस राय, उन चीजों को हम माने जिसके लिए सबूत हो। और ये केवल विज्ञान में नहीं, ये समाज में भी यही एक मंत्र जिसे कहना चाहिए वो है कि हमारे सामने किसी राय के बारे में, किसी भी सोच के बारे में प्रमाण क्या है, एविडेंस क्या है, इसका तर्क क्या है, इसके बारे में हम सोचें। समाज के अंदर सबसे इरैशनल बात समाज के अंदर की अर्थव्यवस्था है। तेजल ने कहा उस काल के बारे में कि विज्ञान भी पिछड़ेपन, फ्यूडल वैल्यूज, उसके अंदर की अंधकार, धर्म के अंदर ही जादू टोना के अंधकार से निकल के आने वाले संघर्ष का एक हिस्सा बना था 301 साल पहले। पर हमें ये भी ध्यान रखना चाहिए कि उस टाइम पे ये जो युद्ध लड़ा गया था, आधुनिकता का युद्ध, वो आधुनिकता का युद्ध, ये एक बहुत बड़ा हिस्सा उसका ये था कि बाजार की द रैशनैलिटी ऑफ द मार्केट, कि ये माना जाता था कि कैपिटलिज्म अगर आए तो पूंजीवाद जो मार्केट फोर्स के रैशनैलिटी के आधारित होगा, उससे जो है समाज के अंदर ये रैशनैलिटी फैलेगा। तो वी हैव टू आल्सो क्वेश्चन द आइडिया ऑफ रैशनैलिटी इटसेल्फ। और तेजल ने ये बात बहुत सही रखा कि समाज के अंदर जितनी इरैशनैलिटी है उसको भी हमें सामने लाना बहुत जरूरी पड़ेगा। मैं एक छोटा उदाहरण देता हूं, उससे मैं अपनी बात को समाप्त करूंगा। पिछले लोकसभा के चुनाव के दौरान एक कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंसी है, एक जिला है जहां पे एक संघ परिवार के प्रवक्ता थे, वो खड़े थे और उन्होंने इस बात को फैलाना शुरू किया कि हमारे जिले से हिंदुओं को भगाया जा रहा है, कि बहुत हिंदू लोग हमारे यहाँ से भागे जा रहे हैं क्योंकि दूसरे तबके के लोग, दूसरे मजहब के लोग इतना आतंक यहाँ पे फैला रहे हैं कि हिंदू लोग यहाँ से भगाए जा रहे हैं। तो लोगों ने जाके तहसीलदार से जांच पड़ताल किया, डीएम से बात की और मालूम पड़ा कि आंकड़े कोई नहीं थे। आबादी उतनी ही थी हिंदू मुसलमान की उस इलाके में आज भी और पहले भी। जब इस बात को उस व्यक्ति के सामने रखा गया, उन्होंने कहा कि देखिए आंकड़े अपनी जगह हैं, उनसे हमें कोई मतलब नहीं है, हमें मतलब है सोच। तो हम अगर इस सोच को फैलाएं कि हाँ एक तबके के ऊपर दबाव डाला जा रहा है दूसरी और लोग अगर इसको मानते हैं तो उस सोच को हम अगर आगे दे पाए तो इसमें आंकड़े का कोई रोल नहीं। सो टू मी आज के दिन में द बैटल ऑफ साइंटिफिक टेम्पर is also the battle between perception and reality। जो एक मान्यता को समाज के अंदर लाना चाह रहे हैं, तर्क आधारित नहीं, पर उसी मान्यता को लेके और जहां मौका पड़े कुछ आंकड़े भी ले आए, कुछ नासा के सैटेलाइट को भी घुसाया, कुछ आयुर्वेद में क्लिनिकल ट्रायल भी करवाया, पर मेन मकसद ये है समाज के अंदर अंधकार को फैलाना, गहन सोच के खिलाफ की लड़ाई। जितने हमने देखे पिछले 4-5 साल के अंदर, यूनिवर्सिटी के ऊपर जो हमले हुए, आईआईटी के ऊपर हमले हुए, यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ हैदराबाद के ऊपर हमले हुए, जवाहरलाल नेहरू विश्वविद्यालय पे हमले हुए, तेजल के भूतपूर्व संस्था टाटा इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ सोशल साइंस पे हमले हुए, वो क्यों हुए? क्योंकि ये जगह, ये विश्वविद्यालय, इनके अंदर गहन सोच, क्रिटिकल थिंकिंग की एक भावना और एक सभ्यता, एक कल्चर बढ़ाया जा रहा था स्टूडेंट्स, टीचर्स, प्रगतिशील ताकतों की तरफ से। उसको मिटाने के लिए ये लड़ाई लड़ी जा रही है। सो द फाइट इज फॉर डार्कनेस एज अगेंस्ट लाइट। लोगों को जब तक अंधकार में रखा जाए, और उस अंधकार में तो एक खुला मैदान है अंधविश्वास को फैलने का, उस समाज के अंदर अंधेरे में रखा जाए और वैज्ञानिक दृष्टिकोण से जो रोशनी निकलती है वो वहां पे रोशनी दिखे ना, ये आज के दिन में लड़ाई है। और इस लड़ाई में हमें, जैसे मैंने शुरू में कहा, a good warrior is one who recognizes the main enemy and targets his strategy against that enemy। और हम अपने दुश्मन को पहचाने और उस दुश्मन के साथ लड़ाई लड़ें। बाकी छोटी लड़ाइयां हम बाद में लड़ते रहेंगे कि कौन दिन में कितनी बार पंचांग को देखता है या नहीं देखता है, वो पूजा करता है या नहीं करता है, वो अपने घर में जो करे वो करे। मेरे लिए वो आज के दिन में नंबर 1 टारगेट नहीं है। मेरे सामने कई और महत्वपूर्ण मुद्दे हैं जिनको मैं सामने रख के अपने जंग को आगे बढ़ाऊंगा। मैं इससे अपनी बात को समाप्त करूं।
Thank you very much, sir. That was quite an interesting intervention. Let's have a Q&A session. First question is from Saqib for Tejal. He's asking that what makes the state, different political parties, etc., to resort to extremely unscientific and absurd claims and statements in India? What purpose does it serve?
I think Raghu just sort of addressed that question quite comprehensively. So I'm not sure, I should go into the details of it. But, I do agree with Raghu that there is this, it's not, one should not sort of also oversimplify the response of the current dispensation to science as sort of trying to, it's anti-science of a very different nature. It is the appropriation of the language of science to talk about pseudoscience or, faith or whatever, beliefs, etc., to basically create some kind of an control over the social system. So it's not, or sort of perpetuate social hierarchy. So it's not the same kind of rejection of science that you had in the sort of the creationism, etc., anti-science movements of the past. It's a very different kind of anti-science response. They're okay with certain kinds of science. They're okay with the Mangalyaan and things like that, right? They're okay with the mission failing. They're okay with failures also here, because there is some that, you know, there is this big bang sort of support for science that is there, that there is a facade of it. But then there is this peddling of all of this by the appropriation of the language of science. And here, I mean, you know, one of the things that I also mentioned, I think, is to sort of use science only in terms of, you know, only as another source of authority. Right? So science is not seen as a process. Science is not seen as a way in which you understand, but science is seen as another authority that gives you a set of outcomes and makes pronouncements, just like religious institutions did at one point of time. So you have here this thing. Science is not the anti-authoritarian nature of science is not the basis of their support to science. It's a very different sort of appropriation of the language of science. So, but I mean, all the other aspects of why they do it, etc., I think Raghu covered quite comprehensively in his talk. So I don't want to sort of go into that. You can maybe take the other questions.
Rahul, there are 2 or 3 questions specifically addressed to me. Do you think I can address those? Yeah?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. There's one question here. Why should Dr. Dabholkar not be called a rationalist? Okay. I think that's a very important question. I think there is a big difference between rationalism as we know it and promotion of scientific temper as I outlined it. And I think the main difference is that a rationalist, for him, all things quote unquote irrational are the enemy. Okay. But this selection of things which are irrational usually tend to fall into the box of superstitions, religious beliefs, etc. And those are the main targets. So your target is Sai Baba, who produces vibhuti out of thin air, or a statue of Jesus from which holy water emanates, or Ganesha from whom milk emanates. But the irrationality of society around us, the irrationality of the political economy that we see around us, the irrationality of the marketplace does not seem to be a major target of rationalists. I think that is one of the big differences. And I think all of Narendra Dabholkar's writings and lectures communicate, while he did target many of these superstitious beliefs, his aim there was not the particular example, but to bring out how to judge what is true and what is not true, and the use of the scientific method in order to be able to do that. Now, I think that is a very different proposition from a purely rationalist viewpoint, and that's why I much prefer to call Narendra Dabholkar a champion of scientific temper rather than a rationalist. A rationalist I would use for Kovur, who spent 25 years of his life challenging Sai Baba all over the country. That's a rationalist, because for him that was a pure target, that this guy is spreading irrational ideas and I'm going to combat it. But there are 1,000 other irrationalities in society about which Kovur was not really looked at. Kovur never looked at them as a target for himself. For him, irrationality was these godmen, and that was it as far as he was concerned. I don't think Narendra Dabholkar was like that. Narendra Dabholkar was also very conscious of the fact that there is as much irrationality in society as there is in superstitions. And I think that's what distinguishes the two.
Thank you.
There is a question
there
here
is-
in Hindi which is too small for me to read. I can't read it.
Yeah, I can read that for you. विज्ञान का विकास भी मानव के सामाजिक विकास का ही हिस्सा है. पूर्व सामंतवादी समाज से लेकर पूंजीवादी समाज तक विज्ञान का विकास हुआ है, जो अधिकांशतः मानवता के हितों को दर्शाता है. तो क्या हम ये आज कह सकते हैं कि आज पूंजीवादी समाज में विज्ञान सिर्फ पूंजीवाद के लिए ही है? हम इससे कैसे विज्ञान को अलग कर सकते हैं?
इसके लिए मुझे लगता है कि एक टॉपिक एक दिन अलग से बैठ के एक बहस करनी पड़ेगी, पर संक्षेप में अगर रखा जाए, हम लोग खास करके जन विज्ञान आंदोलन में, और हमारे ये शीर्षक जो नाम ही है उसी से ये बात निकल के आता है कि हम चाहते हैं, हम उस दिशा में काम करते हैं कि विज्ञान केवल वैज्ञानिक का नहीं हो और केवल जो कंपनी है, जो पूंजीपति वर्ग है, जो उद्योगपति हैं, उनके कब्जे में ना रहे. विज्ञान उस कब्जे से निकल के जनता के हाथ में एक हथियार बन के निकले. अफसोस की बात यह है कि पूंजीवादी ढांचे के अंदर विज्ञान हो, और क्यों हम केवल विज्ञान के बारे में क्यों सोचते हैं, कोई भी ज्ञान हो, अर्थशास्त्र क्यों ना हो, वो सब आज के दिन जो समाज को चलाते हैं, जो रूलिंग क्लास कहिए, पूंजीपति वर्ग कहिए, उनके लिए काम करते हैं, क्योंकि वो समाज को वो चला रहे हैं. तो वो समाज के अंदर जितना ज्ञान है वो भी उसके स्वामित्व को अपने हाथ में रख के उसको अपने औजार की तरह यूज करके अपने इंटरेस्ट को बढ़ा रहे हैं. और ये केवल आधुनिक काल की बात नहीं है, ये तो पहले भी प्राचीन काल में भी अगर देखें तो विज्ञान की जो बढ़ोतरी हुई, हथियार का बड़प्पन होना, गन पाउडर को लेके करना या केमिकल इंडस्ट्रीज को बढ़ाना, ये तो या तो पूंजीवादी वर्ग ने अपने लिए किया या सत्ताधारी ताकतों ने अपने सत्ता को बढ़ाने के लिए इस्तेमाल किया. व्यापारी वर्ग ने पूरे विज्ञान को लेके उसको आगे बढ़ाया, एस्ट्रोनॉमी को लेके उसको एक हथियार बनाया अपने व्यापार को फैलाने के लिए और दूसरे देशों को गुलाम बना के उनके ऊपर राज करने के लिए. वो विज्ञान की बढ़ोतरी तो हुई, पर उसके साथ साथ पूंजीवाद की भी बढ़ोतरी हुई. और ये हम सब जानते हैं कि पूंजीवाद, आधुनिक विज्ञान और एक तरह से जो आधुनिक सोच है, ये या काल्पनिक सोच है, धार्मिक सुधार है, ये इकट्ठे बढ़े थे. अब ये कहना बहुत मुश्किल है कि पहले कौन सा आया और दूसरा नंबर पे कौन सा आया, पर ये हम जानते हैं, इतिहास हमें दिखाता है कि ये तीनों साथ साथ हुए. सामंतवाद को खत्म करना, धार्मिक विचार के अंदर तब्दीली लाना और अर्थव्यवस्था को बदलना, ये तीनों साथ साथ हुए थे विज्ञान, आधुनिक विज्ञान के जन्म के साथ. तो जाहिर है कि पूंजीवादी ढांचे को के साथ चलते चलते जितना पूंजीवाद आगे बढ़ेगा, पूंजीवाद सत्ताधारी ताकतों का कोशिश तो रहेगा ही कि वो विज्ञान को कब्जे में रखें, वैज्ञानिक संस्थाओं को अपने कब्जे में रखें, ताकि विज्ञान का इस्तेमाल उनके हित के लिए हो और जनता के हित में ना हो. और हमारी कोशिश है कि विज्ञान को हम हथियार बनाएं जनता के हाथ में, और उसको विज्ञान को भी बदले और समाज को भी बदलने की कोशिश में हम लगाएं.
Related to that is actually another question, that can we achieve a scientific society without changing the existing material conditions?
Firstly, I find this idea of a scientific society very difficult because I really don't know what that means. If it means that we will have a society where everybody is rational and everybody is fully imbued with scientific temper, I frankly would call that a very idealistic notion. But I would also call importantly idealism, the idea that you can transform society purely on the basis of transformation of ideas. I think we all would accept this, that until there are changes in the material conditions, the major shift of thinking and of dominant modes of thought in society will not change. An old bearded gentleman once said, being determines consciousness, not the other way around. So if we think that we can bring about revolutionary changes or complete social transformation purely by consciousness, I think that would be idealism in the classic sense.
Should I take the questions that are there for me?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add a little bit to what Raghu said. I'm not so sure that, if you sort of apply the concept of irrationality, Raghu, to sort of everything from the marketplace to capitalism itself. You say that capitalism as a system is irrational. I think that would be too broad a statement to sort of make, because it sort of emerges out of the particular contradictions of a pre-modern system. And so therefore, and it has its own, the belief that capitalism is the end game and that there is nothing beyond this, and that it is, it is the best possible system to allocate or whatever, distribute resources, because the development of productive forces has been the maximum under capitalism. That belief is irrational. I agree with you on that, because, we've also seen the crises of capitalism and the fact that it has the way in which it sort of, also has increased the frequency and the intensity of the crises as we go along, especially in the post-liberalization period. But so you have examples of why capitalism is not the end game again, but you also have a theoretical basis to criticize the fact that, it is not. So this belief that the markets will solve everything, I would agree with you. But to say that, the system of social relations that you see around you is in itself an example of irrationality. Social relations in terms of, economic social relations, they are a product of a certain economic process. To say that those itself are irrationality, I don't think I would go so far. I would apply that definitely to caste, because they emerge out of a blatantly, unscientific sort of understanding of some genetic hierarchy which does not exist. Whereas capitalism has, the hierarchies under capitalism have a material basis. They don't have a non-material basis. So that sort of differentiation I would probably make. I have another question. I have a question which is excessive emphasis on an interdisciplinary approach in the NEP. Okay, so does school education sort of promote scientific temper? And, does it address scientific temper and the focus on interdisciplinarity, whether it sort of provides more scope for scientific temper? I think, I would give a disclaimer before I say yes or no to that. It's not a yes or no question. Before I respond to that, I would give a disclaimer saying that there is a problem, and this, I think, is implicit in what Raghu said, is the fact that scientists very often do not necessarily, while a lot of their opinions are considered to be important because they are scientists, they hold important positions, they don't necessarily reflect on their opinions when they are spouting them on society. So, for example, I've given these examples before in other talks that, people from IIT writing about caste and merit, people from ISERS, etc., writing about education and things like that. The three, people who own three big manufacturing companies writing a white paper on higher education in this society. So the fact that, there is a whole bunch of people who actually work on these things who have studied these things, who do, who do field work, who do theoretical work, who do archival work. There's an entire bunch of people who have spent their lives finding out that there's no acknowledgement of that. There is no acknowledgement that they themselves need to teach themselves some social science if they have to have an opinion on society. It is not sort of a free for all. That I think, if there is some respect for interdisciplinarity, the fact that there is some, there are other disciplines, and just because you are a great physicist doesn't make you a good epidemiologist. I think we saw this with everybody coming out with a model for COVID-19, no? And things like that. So the fact that there is something about another discipline that you don't know, that the fact that you are an engineer doesn't make you an expert on caste. I think that acknowledgement, if it comes with interdisciplinarity, I think is good. I also think it is necessary the other way around, that if social scientists have some appreciation of the fact that of what science is and what the process of science is, what technology is, and this thing. Then the idea that all of these debates and all of these problems are a matter only of discourse and opposing discourse. There's a strong tendency to make it all about discourse. The actual physical material aspects of a problem are often not in consideration. So for example, it's very easy for me to give an example from my own field of work, which is energy and climate change. You have many social scientists now working on this, especially because environment, etc., are becoming a big thing. So everybody has an opinion about renewable energy. Everybody has an opinion about the environment, with absolutely no acknowledgement of the fact that the system of energy production, generation, etc., has some of its own technical characteristics and constraints. Right? It's not only about how markets work and how they don't work. It is not only about where access, etc., and how access should be provided. That is dependent on the technical aspects of this thing. So if that appreciation, that transdisciplinary appreciation can be generated, it is possible. I wouldn't call that scientific temper necessarily. I think that process would be much more. I think for scientific temper, one of the ways in which to sort of increase debate, increase discussion in our institutions is to actually increase diversity in our institutions. Get people from different paths, different backgrounds, social backgrounds, genders, etc. And you have debate, encourage debate. That is something that neither the NEP is doing, and there have been constant attacks, like Raghu said, on institutions where this has been attempted. Any attempt at increasing representation, you see that some diversity now. You have a slew of policies that they encourage privatization. Whatever little diversity you had achieved is also going to go away. So this is sort of inherently antithetical to the development of scientific temper. The fact of privatizing education, making it more exclusive, attacking debate, discussion in education, and then sort of making sure that what you do inside the institute only serves narrow class interests, and a certain sort of, you are bound by the fact that you have to pay off your loan, you have to sort of go and work for somebody outside, don't have a capability of that. So I would separate the two these things. So it's a long answer to that question. Is there any other? The last
maybe
question.
You can take the other.
Yeah.
Is
it possible for someone?
It seems that blind faith is being spread
Yeah.
more in quantity and speed in our society.
Yeah, I'll take that.
I also want to respond to that, and in some sense, in little disagreement with Raghu, in terms of, I agree completely that tactically one has to choose our enemies and train our guns on the biggest culprits, and we should do that. There is no doubt that we should call out all of these, the guys who are murdering, activists who defend scientific temper. They have to be called out. We also have to defend, very brazen peddling of pseudoscience, etc., in society. And the Sangh Parivar, of course, is the biggest, the biggest group that is therefore has to be our main enemy that we need to address. And when you go as an activist, when you go to the people, it's a very different interaction. That's a very, it's not, you have to go with some cognizance of the fact that there is agency for some change, there isn't agency for another change. So you cannot go to the people with a program that cannot be worked out, given the fact that their agency is limited because of their material conditions. So that all of those are tactical decisions that a movement has to take. But I think what has happened now, so in over the last few years, is that the scientific establishment, all of you've been part of organizations, etc. before. The radical element of these scientific establishments has gone down over a period of time.
Sure.
They do not speak out as, the Academy of Scientists position and the letter that they issued recently is a welcome change. I'm saying over a period of time, they have become more silent about some of these things. And what that does is it weakens the discourse that you can then also generate amongst people.
Sure.
So you need to have a section that pushes the envelope of what the public discourse can be, that actually provides a much more direct attack on then, and also a very self-reflective attack on even, I think, faith and things like that. While you might not go with an idea, with a program of atheism to the people directly, it is a project that you need to perpetuate and you need to sort of propagate at some level in the movement, so that at the level of ideas also and at the level of practice, you're constantly pushing the boundaries of what is possible in society with a more sort of a radical sort of response to this.
Can I just come in a bit on that, Tejal?
Sure.
Yeah. I'd like to supplement that, what Tejal just said. See, first, whether blind faith is being spread more, I think in the last decade or so, this is not applicable only to India. If you look around you in the world today, from Trump's America to Johnson's UK and the referendum war on whether to stay in the EU or not, or Jair Bolsonaro's Brazil, or Erdogan's Turkey, you find the spread of irrationality, if you call it that, a rebellion against liberalism, rooted in extremely conservative, reactionary ideologies, has resurfaced in society, and that's a fact, And I don't think we should be looking at this as a battle which is being lost by the champions of scientific temper, because I think the battlefield is somewhere else on this issue. The battle is of conservatism versus liberalism in society. In India, for example, our ruling forces, just like in the US constantly trumps harangue is against the liberals. And today he lumps the liberals together with the left. As we all know, in the US, Joe Biden, I wouldn't think of using the word left to describe Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or anybody else. But Trump lumps them together. Left, liberal. The liberal to him itself is so far left that it is anathema to him. And the spread of these conservative values in Western society, in many societies, partly as a reaction to the growth of modernism. After all, Erdogan's Turkey is a battle against Ataturkism there, just as much as Modi's battle here is a battle against Nehruism in India. It's a battle between the directions in which the polity and society is sought to be moved. And there are conservative forces who would like to push the discussion along those lines. And they share common thread, which is the point that Tejal was just making. Don't foster a culture of discussion and debate. don't foster a discussion based on data and evidence, but foster a discussion based on perception, emotion, feelings of nationalism, of white supremacy, whites under threat, Islam khatre mein hai, which is Erdogan's slogan in Turkey as well, recalling the glory of the great Ottoman Empire. These are atavistic urges in society which are being deliberately spread. And this is not a battle just on scientific temper alone. So I just wanted to make that a point. I know we are all fond of self-criticism to the extent that we blame ourselves for everything in society. Society has gone wrong because we have not done enough to change society. Fair enough, we wear the crown of thorns. Okay, but I think let's keep a perspective here as to what is happening. But I believe that these battles are not separate battles. That's the point that I wanted to make. The battle for scientific temper is a battle for the rationality of ideas, yes, but is equally a battle for advancing the freedom of ideas and critical thinking. I think this term critical thinking we have not propagated sufficiently as part of a core idea of scientific temper. A core idea of scientific temper is to promote critical thinking. And all these forces you will see, Bolsonaro, Trump, Erdogan, Modi, all of them are against critical thinking. They are antagonistic to critical thinking, and that is the core of what we are saying. And scientific temper depends on critical thinking as a way forward. That's a part of our core. That's why these struggles are our struggles as well. There's one very interesting question here. Is it possible for someone to be religious / devotional without necessarily being superstitious? I think yes, although Tejal has a point when she says that at some point it will interfere with your work. You can try and compartmentalize. There are people who say, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, meaning I don't practice rituals, okay, but I have this notion of creation, of some force which is bigger than us, etc., etc. Somewhere this is going to seep into this. Of that I'm aware. That's okay. But I think yes, I know many people who are religious in the sense of feeling that there is a greater spiritual quest that they are on, without being ritualistic, and therefore not being superstitious in the sense of believing black cats running across the road, or not breaking a coconut before I go and take my exams, etc. I may not do that. So to that extent, yes, the superstitious part is not there. But as Tejal was just talking about, I mean, we have come across in the course of so many of our campaigns, and Tejal was just talking about the scientists, for example. See, today, this was earlier also, two questions back, this was part of the discussion. The scientific establishment, by definition, is an establishment working under the ruling class, in the service of the ruling class. And in our country today, this ruling class has a government which is not only promoting the interests of the capitalist class, they also want to push this idea of dominance over all democratic institutions, and therefore they demand obedience of a kind that the Nehruvian establishment did not. This is a reality. Scientists used to be freer in expressing themselves and their opinions 20 years ago than they are today. Because today the threat of dismissal or being thrown out or marginalized is far greater. And this is not true only of the scientific community. This is true across ministries, economic departments, government departments, elsewhere. Bureaucrats don't open their mouth now like they used to do before. You just imagine poor Manmohan Singh's fate when Narendra Modi and company were attacking his government. How many bureaucrats and scientists from inside the government started attacking Manmohan Singh also? Because they sense, it's like a pack senses when the weak animal is going to lose, and therefore start supporting the new leader, because they know that the old leader is going to get wiped out. And that was beginning to happen then. Then there were 100 flowers blooming, and the number of critiques of Manmohanomics were abound. You don't see that happening now because that's the nature of the establishment. But then when I go around campaigning, as Tejal was saying, there are scientists, there are economists, there are people in the ruling establishment who take a particular line. Okay, now for me, a person who opposes crony capitalism today, who opposes the so-called Atmanirbharta campaign which is being run, is an ally to me. If that person also happens to be a person with a photograph of the Sri Venkateshwara temple on his wall, frankly speaking, I'm not that concerned. Whereas the extremely rational, modern person who has no religion, doesn't go anywhere, but is completely pro-capitalist, is an enemy to me. And there are many. If you look at the talking heads around you, you will find the most suave, modern thinkers. You will not find a photograph of any god inside their house, I'm sure. He's never seen the inside of a temple, I'm sure. But he completely advocates neoliberal economics and making strategic partnerships with the United States. To me, he's an enemy. The guy who supports true self-reliance in our country, but still goes to the Tirupati temple maybe in the evening or has a photograph, he's an ally as far as I'm concerned today. So I really look at this in terms of where a person stands in the context of the major socio-economic technological battles of the day. The time will come down the road when we will tackle some of those other issues as well. Right now, to me, I know where the main battles lie, and I would rather focus on those.
There's one more question. How do you imagine the future of scientific temper when the state itself is trying its best to kill it? Like when the education minister himself says that astrology is more superior than science.
Give Raghu a little bit of rest. I'll take
yeah,
that.
I'll just chip in one sentence, Tejal, and then you can take off. My brief take on that is the battle for scientific temper will not be won in government. It will not be won through constitutional battles. It will be won on the streets. The battle to change people's minds is part of the battle to change social conditions. These two battles are being simultaneously fought. So I don't see that scientific temper is a separate battle being fought under the banner of Article 51AH of the Constitution. This is a battle for social transformation, and this is a part of that battle. So the scientific temper battle will be won when we have achieved social transformation to the extent that we want. Tejal, ball is in your court.
Yeah. No, I mean, I second that completely, that it is, that's why we talk about it as a movement, and also a sort of a much more universal internationalist understanding of what science is, has to go hand in hand with the more universal movements for equality and justice. I think, it's not, it's not something that should be seen separately as a separate fight for scientific temper, because it has the word science in it. I sometimes think that it gets sort of reduced to what scientists can do, cannot do, etc. But there has also been a history, for example, of scientists sort of, leading movements for scientific temper in the country, or forming, groups, communities, etc.,
That's
to
right.
talk about this, bring this aspect of science to the people. So I think that's why this collapse is understandable, if not if something that we should think about critically. But yeah, I don't have too much more to add. Just one sort of last point is, I think that when you have these battle of ideas that we spoke about. You have the conservatives who want to perpetuate conservative ideas in society, and you have somebody who you have sort of you're trying to build an opposition to those conservative ideas. What kind of opposition will actually be is likely to be successful? And somehow when I talk about, I don't mean the sort of the kindly anti-BJP, really self-reliant, anti-imperialist guy who might believe in God, etc. But if you look at, for example, the response to the narrative. Now, for the classic example of recent times is what has been the response of the so-called liberals, etc., in the Congress party about the Prime Minister's participation in the Bhumi Pujan of the Ram Temple.
Yeah.
It is, and as people who are talking about scientific temper, as scientific movements, we have to call that out. At one point of time, Raghu referred to this as the Nehruvian era. It was possible for Nehru also to write a letter to the president saying, don't attend this thing, don't go and wash the feet of the Brahmins.
Exactly.
That was possible also because internationally, there was a discussion on the more radical aspects, the aspects of justice, equality, etc., that are very much part of the movement, not a movement of scientific temper, but a larger movement for equality in which critical thinking and scientific temper are inherent, inseparable parts.
Correct.
Right? And that environment makes even a so-called liberal who would otherwise have problematic positions, and Nehru did have his problematic positions on things, nevertheless take a more secular position because he derives strength from that. Today, you have the same Congress party that does not have the courage to actually call this out for the outrage that it is.
Yeah.
They in fact send out tweets supporting something like this, saying that, congratulations or whatever. It is a complete outrage. I think that when you have a more radical movement, you might not attack this, like I said earlier, tactically, but you have a discourse which is more radical, which takes this on head on, then which creates a discussion in society about faith and religion, which is more radical without necessarily, calling people who believe in God foolish. I'm not saying that, that is not this thing that you should make. But take this on as a debate seriously and push the boundaries of that debate.
Right.
Then maybe the liberal class will become worthy of being called allies if they ever ally. They will be worthy of it. Today, I don't even feel like allying with them because they're a complete disgrace. So I'll end with that.
Yeah. Good. Okay.
That's a great conclusion, I would say. In the struggle against anti-authoritarianism, this critical thinking as the key for all the struggles, and the fact that we have to forward the struggles along with keeping in mind the principal contradictions, as Raghunandan has said. So I think there are no more questions. I would thank all the speakers and participants for their participation, and the speakers for a great talk. I would hand it over to Pranav. Pranav?
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. On behalf of Anveshan, I'd like to thank Tejal and Raghunandan and Rahul for taking out time for the talk. And it was an excellent discussion. The talk will be uploaded on our YouTube channel very soon. I've posted the link for it in the chat box. So those of you who want to revisit the talk can follow that. And we hope to see you for our discussions in the future too. So thank you once again. Thank you so much.